2019, after the fall of New York, is certainly one of the most imaginative and one of the most fully realised examples of Italian post-apocalyptic cinema that we saw in the early to mid-80s and a few years beyond. So this one's directed by Sergio Martino. It came to us in 1983, and it was, of course, inspired by not only Mad Max and Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, but also by Escape from New York, of course, and The Warriors. And with all of these influences, the director, Sergio Martino, certainly was able to make something that he could call his own, and something that transcended all of those influences. So the movie starts with introducing us to our baddies, the villains of the piece, the Uraks. So the Uraks are apparently a conglomeration of European and Asian nations. For some reason, they've relocated to New York, and they just had a nuclear war about a decade earlier with against the Pan-American Confederacy, who we can only assume was the United States, Canada, and Mexico, whereas the Uraks seem to be mainly made up of European nations and the former Soviet Union and maybe China and other parts of Asia, although we don't see any Asian Uraks in this movie. So we can only conclude that their definition of Asia basically is comprised of Russia, I guess. So it opens up with the Uraks kind of herding up or rounding up some mutated New Yorkers to experiment on. Eugenics are a big part of the Uraks agenda in this film. They love it. They love it more than your average escaped Nazi war criminal. And they're basically going through the motions, rounding up any of these mutated, irradiated New Yorkers. And we see the Uraks, or at least the Urak horsemen, and stylistically they look great. They look very timeless, very classic, and it really sets the tone for the whole movie. So then we see, in my opinion, the most awesome dissolve in motion picture history. And I strongly urge you to check it out if you haven't seen 2019 After the Fall of New York. So basically the camera dissolves from a flamethrower to the exhaust pipe of our hero's car. Our hero being a gentleman called Parsifal. And I believe that in ancient mythology, perhaps ancient Greek mythology, Parsifal basically translates as like a well-meaning melon head or something like that. Some of you philosophy majors, philosophy students might want to fact check me on that, but I believe that Parsifal does translate to a well-meaning melon head or something to that effect. So Parsifal's played by American male model, Michael Sopkiw. So Michael Sopkiw's a bit of a Tom Cruise lookalike, and he basically spends his days going from irradiated settlement to irradiated settlement, competing in these Death Race 2000 style games that involve souped up, armoured and weaponized cars, weaponized vehicles, running each other off the road in what appears to be an abandoned quarry somewhere outside Rome. And to add insult to injury, when the opponents get run off the road in these games, you do jump out of the cars and engage in hand-to-hand combat. So quite a brutal and violent sport. If you thought that the UFC was violent, then you ain't seen nothing yet. So we open with seeing Parsifal's driving prowess and his hand-to-hand combat prowess, which is a great way to non-cynically offer some exposition to establish that he's a bit of a badass and that he is qualified for the mission that we'll find out about later on in the film. So he beats his opponents. He's alone in his car. There's a whole carload of these goons in this other car that he beats. And through a combination of course, demolition derby and hand-to-hand combat. And when he wins, he's presented with a prize from this really creepy-looking clown that apparently is some sort of prize vending machine, kind of like the post-apocalyptic equivalent of a claw machine, I guess, or something like that, or a poker machine. And we've got the host of these death games, and he offers a bit more exposition. The host of the death games is this old guy that looks a lot like Barry Humphries. Barry Humphries is the guy that played Dame Edna Everage. But basically, looks like Barry Humphries playing Les Patterson, so Les Patterson in this movie. So he goes into all this exposition about how someone that'll beat Parsifal will never be born, purely because no one's ever going to be born because everyone's sterile. So Parsifal's awarded all of these licenses to kill, and he also gets awarded, of all things, a hermaphrodite. So the hermaphrodite is awarded to him as a kind of sex slave, I guess. And he seems, it's hard to tell whether he's keen to be awarded a hermaphrodite or not. Nothing in this movie seems to excite Parsifal terribly much, or at least Michael Sopkiw, who plays Parsifal. So it's hard to tell whether he's taking this hermaphrodite because he's interested in hermaphrodites, or if he's taking the hermaphrodite under duress. Who's to say? He winds up freeing the hermaphrodite after a few minutes of riding through the desert, and he kills these guys, uses his licenses to kill. Apparently licenses to kill allow you to not only kill someone but steal all their property, which may explain why he doesn't steal the property of anyone else he kills in this movie, because he uses up his license to kill on these hapless, irradiated people who've drunk contaminated water. So the hermaphrodite, thanks to Parsifal, gets all their stuff and rides off on a horse. And Parsifal rides off into the sunset on this really cool trike chopper type bike. But he isn't riding off into the sunset in prosperity. He's approached and kidnapped by a spaceship or a weird hovercraft helicopter type thing from the Pan American Confederacy. He's kidnapped with a stun laser, and he is taken to Alaska of all places, which looks more like Antarctica, or at least an awesome miniature model of Antarctica with a complete with a Pan American Confederacy base. Kind of looks like the whole Rebels base on Hoth, I guess you'd say. And the president's played by Edmund Purdom. So Edmund Purdom, some of you may remember him as the crusty old dean from Pieces, or as the detective from Don't Open Till Christmas. And Edmund Purdom basically gives Snake Plissken, Parsifal, an offer he can't refuse, in much the same way as Lee Van Cleef did to Snake Plissken in Escape from New York. So apparently there's one fertile woman on Earth, and she's located somewhere in New York. So he, Edmund Purdom, the president of the Pan American Confederacy, basically sends Parsifal and a guy called Bronx, who's fluent in the tongue of New Yorkers apparently, or something, or knows his way around. I'm not sure why he's qualified to be there. And also a guy called Ratchet, played by Romano Pupo, probably best remembered as Trash Senior in Bronx Warriors 2. So he sends the trio on a clandestine mission into the Big Apple to try and rescue this last fertile woman and save humanity. So that's the setup for the movie. So This is massive in scale in terms of Italian post-apocalyptic movies. They certainly jam a lot into 90 minutes. So there's encounters with various gangs in this one. There's an awesome action sequence that takes place in what looks like an old destroyed bus depot in one of the best action sequences of the movie. We also meet a gang called the Needle People. Presumably they're called the Needle People because they were heroin addicts or something like that before the Holocaust, and now they spend their days hunting rats with these needle-like spears. And the Needle People are led by Al Yamanuchi, probably best remembered as Ninja from 2020 Texas Gladiators. And he was also in the new Gladiator as well. So a couple of veteran of a few post-nukes. And this is also where Parsifal meets his love interest in the movie, young lady called Giada, I think it is. And Giada's a dead ringer for Daryl Hannah. And she's probably a better actress than Daryl Hannah as well. So she's our love interest in the movie for Parsifal. Although it's hard to tell if Parsifal's interested in anything in this movie because he is very deadpan. He makes Charles Bronson and Clint Eastwood look animated by comparison. And we also meet various gangs in this movie because it does have some strong influences from the Warriors in much the same way as 1990 the Bronx Warriors did. So there's a gang of apes, believe it or not. They seem to be circus apes. And the gang of apes is, of course, led by Big Ape, who's played by George Eastman, a.k.a. Luigi Montefiore. The late, great Luigi Montefiore, who sadly left us quite recently. So this is one of his more memorable roles as Big Ape. And he chews up the scenery like it was bunches of bananas. And they also run into a pint-sized gentleman called Shorty, of course. And Shorty's an interesting character. He's a bit of a... you would never tell Shorty a secret or share any information that you didn't want the entire world knowing, because Shorty is, let's just say, a lagger. He basically gives away everything, spills his guts at every opportunity. He tells Parsifal and Big Ape and the rest of the cast exactly where the last fertile woman is. And the last fertile woman is kept in suspended animation by a guy called the Professor, and it's his daughter. So Shorty doesn't know these people from... what's a good analogy? Shorty doesn't know these people from a loaf of bread. That's as good as I can think of off the cuff. And despite the fact that he knows nothing about these people, he leads them directly to the Professor's daughter, who is the last hope for humanity. And then they attempt to basically escape from New York, if you'll pardon the pun, with the Professor's daughter in tow in her cryogenic stasis, I guess you'd say. And yeah, that's the premise of the movie basically in a nutshell. So after the fall of New York, 2019, after the fall of New York, is a very cool little movie. It certainly is one of the more fully realised examples of Italian post-apocalyptic cinema. This one does a top-notch job at world building. The soundtrack to this one's amazing. The soundtrack to a lot of these Italian post-nukes is very amazing and timeless. It's kind of this whole synthesizer effect that was big in the 80s, but really has aged quite well in terms of anything futuristic. And great cast of characters in this one. They may not all necessarily be fantastic actors, but they are all memorable, especially George Eastman, who is a good actor. So George Eastman, of course, plays Big Ape. And Big Ape and his whole group of apes are, of course, influenced by the movie Planet of the Apes. with Charlton Heston. Basically everything about the Uraks is great. They've got this timeless costume design, and they're very memorable villains. They look great on their horses with their flamethrowers in a similar way to the authorities at the end of 1990, the Bronx Warriors. It has this whole cool timeless sort of feel to it, like the whole movie does. There's some great miniature work in this one. A lot of people are cynical about miniatures and things like that, but I always think they improve a movie and they age far better than CGI. So I'll take the miniature ruins of 1990, the Bronx Warriors, or the miniature ruins of After the Fall of New York over any contemporary CGI-laden science fiction movie of 2026. This one's, as I said, it's larger in scope than your average Italian post-apocalyptic movie. They sort of leave no stone unturned with world building and exposition and character development. All the characters are memorable. There's some great set pieces, some great action sequences. Everything's very large in scope, and a lot larger in scope than the budget would suggest. A lot of it's shot on location in New York as well, and presumably in Nevada. And also, as I said, probably in an old quarry someplace. And it certainly is one of the most coherent, best structured, and most memorable. And it stood the test of time better than a lot of post-apocalyptic movies have, both Italian or non-Italian. And it certainly is one of my favourite of the Italian post-nuke cycle that was inspired by movies like Mad Max and Mad Max 2 and Escape from New York, and so on and so forth. So I think that's about all that I have on 2019 After the Fall of New York. You'll spot a lot of familiar faces in this one. George Eastman, of course. There's also Anna Kanakis, who plays the second in command of the Uraks, and you probably best remember her from the New Barbarians, aka Warriors of the Wasteland. And as I said, you have Al Yamanuchi as well. There's Michael Sopkiw, who was in also in Devilfish and Massacre in Dinosaur Valley, and a couple of other films, a couple of other Italian films before he quietly retired from acting forever. Apparently he fell into the whole medicinal supply industry. And by that I don't mean that he became a drug dealer. I believe he peddles glass jars or glass flasks for the whole pharmaceutical industry. So quite a departure from playing Parsifal, I guess, in 2019 After the Fall of New York. So I can't recommend this movie highly enough if you haven't seen it. If you're a fan of post-apocalyptic cinema, especially Italian post-apocalyptic cinema, this is a must-see. And other good ones to check out are films like Endgame, and of course The New Barbarians, and 2020 Texas Gladiators, and The New Gladiators. So quite a few good ones to check out if you haven't before. These movies are good to go into with an open mind. What I love about the Italian movies is that they aren't afraid to wear their influences on their sleeve. You hear these guys get interviewed and they'll openly say that this movie was inspired by that movie, and so on and so forth. And that's a refreshing attitude as far as I'm concerned. You see a lot of movies these days, and these directors are quite arrogant. These filmmakers are quite arrogant, and they kind of pretend that they're creating something groundbreaking, something entirely new, when it's anything but. I went to see the Baby Yoda movie recently, and it was basically a shot-for-shot pastiche of the Lone Wolf and Cub movies. A few of the scenes were lifted directly from those, which is all well and good if you're open about your influences and you're giving credit where credit's due, but I do find it a bit annoying when these new big-budget Hollywood filmmakers who have this kind of air of superiority over B-movies, over exploitation movies, have no qualms about lifting ideas from them and presenting them as their own, while simultaneously indicating that they're superior to movies that were shot 20 years earlier on a fraction of the budget, and movies that have outlived a lot of other films and will basically outlive whatever's being theatrically released in 2026. I mean, people are still watching 2019 After the Fall of New York in 2026. I highly doubt that anyone will be watching any of the theatrical releases from 2026 in 20 years' time. So I guess I've probably said all there is to say, or at least all I can remember, about 2019 After the Fall of New York. One of the most atmospheric, one of the most imaginative, one of the most creative, one of the most fully realised examples of Italian post-apocalyptic cinema. And it's always fun to see the late, great George Eastman in something. If you have any thoughts on 2019 After the Fall of New York, anything that I've forgotten or missed or neglected to mention, by all means let us know in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe. And otherwise I'm off to enjoy the rest of my evening, and I hope you do too. And as always, I hope you take it very easy.